Hi, Phil Simborg for the USBGF. This is a position that came up last weekend at the California Championship in LA, and we were playing matches to 11. Let me get the score right. And it was 2-2, so the score was 9 away, 9 away. I was blue, and the question here is, what is the cube action? Should red double? And if red doubles, should blue take or pass? You can pause this recording, make your decision, and come back to it and see what the right answer is, and we'll talk about it. So why don't you do that? Pause the recording, think about it. Would you double if you were red? And if you were blue, would you take or pass? Okay, I think this is a great example to take you through the process that my partners at the Backgammon Learning Center and I teach. And we teach a basic approach to all cube action that says this. First of all, figure out what is the take point in gammon values. And at 9 away, 9 away, it's pretty much the same as money. Its take point is 25% on a dead cube, but because there's recube big, you can use about 21.5%. So you should take this cube if you can win more than 21.5% of the time. However, you do have to adjust for gammons. You have to consider the fact that blue is going to get gammoned here some of the time. And gammon value, the value of a gammon compared to the value of winning and losing a game in a money game, is a half of what it is for winning the game. So it's 0.5, and pretty much the same thing in this situation. So the first thing is, let's check that. Analyze cube information. Take point, you can see, is very much like money. If we switch this to money, this would say 25 and this would say 20. So we're right there. What about the gammon value? Well, the gammon value that's important is when the cube is at 2. And it's slightly elevated here over 0.5 because in a match it's just going to hurt you a little bit more to get gammoned and have them get closer to winning the match. So we can use 0.5 pretty comfortably in 21.5. The first question red should ask is not whether or not he should double. He should use Woolsey's law. Ask himself, if I were blue, would I take or pass? Well, if you're blue here, how do you know whether you should take or pass? A lot of people look at these things from a positional and experience standpoint, and you just sort of guess whether or not you think you have a take or not. A lot of people who played this position enough know that in blue's situation, he's kind of in trouble here. Red could hit this checker and get a third checker back, which would increase gammons. Red has some good pointing numbers like 5-3 and 6-5 and 6-3 make this point. Double 3 is going to hurt quite a bit. There's some numbers that hit both checkers, like a 5-2. There's all kinds of, well, 5-2 probably hits out here. How about a 3-2 hits here? Well, maybe he hits here too. We need to figure out how he's going to play it. I'm not going to go into that much detail on it, but I just came to the conclusion that I was taking this cube. Now, there's another way that I went about deciding I was taking this cube, and it's by using gammon-adjusted take points. I know my take point is 21.5, and I'm going to adjust that based on what I think the gammons are. So how do you estimate gammons? Well, I can tell you that when I was first told that I should be able to look at these positions and eventually estimate gammons, I thought my teacher was crazy. But after a little bit of practice and some few rules of thumbs and reference positions, it's not that hard to estimate gammons within a few percent. The really top players can usually estimate within 1 or 2%. So I know, for example, I've seen enough of these positions to know if I had the ace point anchor and red had all of his checkers around, I'd get gammoned about 15%. I'm going to get gammoned a little bit more because I don't have the anchor. However, I have all kinds of chances to anchor even if he hits this checker here, and it doesn't look like I'm likely to get blitzed. I think I'm going to make an anchor at some point. So I don't think the gammons are that much more than 15%. And over the board, I estimated, and I really did go through this over the board, I estimated about 18% gammons. Now, I also have a rule of thumb. To figure your gammons, you need to subtract the gammons that you might win. So blue gets credit for the gammons he might win from red. How many gammons will blue win? I have a rule of thumb that works incredibly well. If your opponent has a reasonable double, and this looks like a reasonable double, and he has a checker left in the infield in your side of the board, the gammons are always between 5 and 10%. And that's if he has one or two checkers back here. It's almost always between 5 and 10%. If this checker were back here, it's going to be closer to the 10%. Or if he had two checkers, it would be close to 2%. With one checker, it's almost never as high as 10%. And when this checker's not back here and it's up here, this is going to be closer to the 5% level. So I've estimated blue loses gammons about 18%. He wins gammons about 5%. That's a net gammon loss of 13%. The value of gammons is 0.5, so that's really 6.5 losses attributable to gammons. If I take those 6.5 losses and I add it on to 21.5, I get a gammon adjusted take point of 28. For money games and money games like scores, this works very, very well. At some scores it doesn't work that well and we need to make some adjustments, and I'm not going to get into that right now. But for this particular score, I think if I can win this game about 28% of the time or more, I have a take. And that's how I looked at this game, and I asked myself, can I win this game about a third of the time? I thought I could. I thought I could win it. Maybe not quite a third, but I only need to win it 28% of the time to have a take. To me, I was clear that this was a take. Now, how do I decide if I had to be red, whether or not I should double? Well, first of all, when I ask myself if blue has a take, if the answer is I'm not quite sure, then it's a double. If the answer is I think it's a drop, then it's a double. If the answer is I'm sure it's a take, then you've got a little bit more work to do. But in this case, if I were red, I wouldn't be 100% sure it's a take because it's 28%. This could be less than 28%. And the fact that I might also get a drop, I would double in a flash if I were red here. However, to do it right, once you decide that your opponent should take, there really is only one reason in the world to give the cube. Well, there's two reasons. I guess that's there. I already pointed out one. If you might make a mistake and drop, if you think it's the kind of person that he drops cubes too much, or he might be afraid of this position and you might get a drop, that's a pretty good reason to double. But if you're right that he is going to take and that it is right to take, the only reason you ever give a cube is if you're going to lose your market too much. If on the next roll he's dropping and you don't get the value of getting the 2 points or maybe the 4 points from the gammon. Well, in this case, and in all cases where the take point is like money, 9 market losers out of 36, or 25% of the time, according to O'Hagan's law of market losers, is what it takes to give the cube. Well, I can quickly see a lot of market losers here. The 11 numbers that are a roll of 5, and the 3, 2, and a 4, 1 also hit. The pointing numbers here, double 5 is a killer, 6, 5 makes that point. Double 3s is a killer. Even 6, 2 making this point. There's just a lot of rolls that are really, really good for red. Now we have to subtract from those. We can't call them all market losers because even if he rolls a 5, blue could roll a 5, 3. Or I'm sorry, a 5-2 or a 5-4 an anchor, and still probably take. So even after a hit, even after making the point, it's possible that blue could roll a 5-4. So they're not 100% market losers, but there's still so many that it would seem to me to be a double. And that's exactly what happened in my match. My opponent, who was a very, very fine player, doubled. I did take, and part of the reason I saved this position, and I took a picture of it, is I wasn't sure about this position, and also I could visibly hear something going on with the audience, which is a terrible thing to happen. I could hear one of my friends behind me kind of groaning that I was taking this cube. I could almost hear him whispering to somebody that I should have dropped the cube, which is pretty bad etiquette, by the way. People who are spectating at a match shouldn't make any noises, certainly nothing that could be picked up by the players. And so I decided I better take a picture of this because I knew later on I was going to take some heat for it if I got gammoned here and lost the match. And then my friends who are always so happy to try to help me and point out every one of my blunders right after I lose a match, which is exactly when I really don't want to hear it. I wanted to be safe, so I put it in later along with many other pictures that I took. And it turns out that I was correct to take. And I was a little bit off on my gammon estimate. The gammons weren't so high. It wasn't 18, it's 17. The 5 was pretty close. And you can see that it's a pretty big take. you win the game about 30.5% of the time. Notice I came up with a gammon adjusted take point of about 28. That's not that far. This looks like a fairly small take, only 2.5%. Let me tell you something, 2.5% is a lot. That's why we have to practice this a lot. This is why it's not such an easy game. That's why you need to learn this process and get in the habit of estimating gammons and wins. Anybody would know to take this cube if this blot wasn't here. Anybody would know it's a drop if blue is on the bar and red had another check around. The no-brainers that are clear takes and clear drops and clear doubles, we can pretty much all do fairly well. It's the close ones and the tough ones like this where you need to be able to develop skills, and this is what makes the difference between a good backgammon player and a very good backgammon player. So there's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I thought it was a take. The numbers work out very well. That's my approach. That's the approach we teach at the Backgammon Learning Center. My partners, Perry Gartner, Stick, John O'Hagan, and Tuvia Felt has joined our group and working with beginners and low-level players and getting them acclimated. He's very good at that. David Rockwell advises us the system that we came up with, this approach to the cube, really works well. And if you talk to any really top player, they do use Woolsey's Law. They do use gammon-adjusted take points, and they'll tell you that these principles are very sound. So I would recommend you adopt these for yourself. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the support of the USBGF.